and welcome to Fire Headlines, where we discuss the hottest topics in fire service news. I'm your host, Samantha Didion, and joining me on the panel is Chief Ken Kenna. Our topic today is lithium-ion batteries. U.S. lawmakers are addressing safety concerns over lithium-ion batteries in electric vehicles and other electric mobility devices, such as e-bikes and scooters. Ken, this has been a hot topic in the fire service for quite a while now. So, how do you think the increasing use of electric vehicles and lithium-ion batteries is changing the landscape of fire safety for our first responders?
Wow. Well, first of all, the proliferation of lithium-ion batteries and battery technology in general has fundamentally changed everything about what I remember about the fire service. I mean, it's changed the equipment that we use. It's changed the way we respond to calls. It's changed fire apparatus. There are a couple of agencies in California that are driving electric fire apparatus. So I mean, without question, it has completely changed the landscape of pretty much everything, including the fire service. From a fire safety perspective, of course, I mean it's like any sort of technological evolution. It's like it brings with it a set of unknowns. These technologies are often very complex, and we don't necessarily know what the implications of them are going to be until we have some experience with it, until we run a call or we try to do something. We're like, okay, what are we up against here? I mean, the landscape changes pretty quickly, I would say.
Do you have any experience in an incident that involves a lithium-ion battery?
We had a call a number of years ago. Somebody, it must have been a short circuit of the battery system, just sitting still. So it was just a simple short circuit. It wasn't involved in an accident or anything like that. It was just sitting in a residential driveway. Fortunately, it was in the driveway. It was away from the structure, so the vehicle, though it was on fire, wasn't threatening the structure. Once they determined that that it wasn't going to burn the structure down, then it just became the objective was just to put out the car fire. What they found very quickly, though, was that you couldn't just put out the car fire. Trying to gain access to the battery compartment now that the vehicle is on fire, you don't have access to the normal shutoffs and those kinds of things, even if you knew where they were. So they didn't have the ability to disconnect electrical service, and they couldn't actually get water into the compartment where the short circuit had happened and the batteries were. So it was a car fire in a residential neighborhood. They ended up having to hook up to a hydrant with a supply line and just continue to flow water on it for the better part of a day and into the evening time before a combination of two things. One, the batteries had been so consumed that there was very little burning anymore anyways. And the car had been compromised to the point that water was finally able to get in. So, long way to answer your question. Yes, I have.
And was there any kind of safety concerns for your firefighters on those scenes? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Vehicle fires bring with them, a whole host of safety concerns. First and foremost is the location of the fire. Vehicle fires on the side of the road or on the side of a highway or something like that. You're in harm's way. You have traffic going by, so you got that issue. But if you just separate out the products of combustion and all the plastics and the stuff that's burning and all the toxic stuff that comes off of that, you've got that. Now you have an electric vehicle fire with a significant amount of both voltage and amperage, very dangerous, and it's being impinged by fire. So now it's compromised. You're trying to put the vehicle fire out, so you're putting yourself in a position where you have to obviously be close to the vehicle, and you run the risk of electric shock. You run the risk of exposure to other types of things as well. So yeah, I think there's no question, but I wouldn't want to overinflate that this is all of a sudden the hazard. There's myriad number of hazards that come with any of the operations that we do. I mentioned the location of the vehicle fire, being on the side of a roadway. You could look at the vehicle fire and see that and see that that's the hazard. But the vehicle's driving right behind you, if they're not paying attention, that's a way bigger hazard for public safety personnel than the vehicle fire is, to be honest with you. One of the other things that I think is really important for everybody to, sort of keep in mind is cars don't drive away from vehicle fires. Okay. They just don't. They have to be, put on a flatbed typically. The tires are going to be flat. It's going to be completely destroyed. You got to tow these things away and you take them to a tow yard. Well, the hazard of a vehicle fire by itself is one thing. Electrical vehicle fires, though, are a bit unique. So when you put them on the tow truck, things are shifting around. It could re-short and reignite, and that does happen. That vehicle could get all the way back to the tow yard and be dropped off in the yard and start back up again. So reignitions with electric vehicle fires is of a particular concern. So you pick up the hazard, you move it someplace else, everything's out of sight, out of mind. But in a tow yard, it presents a threat to other vehicles and potentially even a larger conflagration. So there are other things to consider here that you wouldn't ordinarily have to think about with a gas-powered vehicle fire. So it's just something to be mindful of, that just because the fire is out at this moment doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to stay out.
Okay, so with new regulations being considered for lithium-ion batteries, battery safety specifically, do you think that it'll have a significant impact on fire prevention or response in the field?
Fire prevention for sure. There's no question, and response for sure. But fire prevention, and I will argue all day long that fire prevention has some of the largest challenges. They are on the front lines and oftentimes dealing with the face-to-face politics of builders and business owners and any number of things. And so they're always being challenged when they're trying to educate the community about the hazards that they face and having them address those things through fire prevention measures. That is an uphill battle. With the proliferation of lithium-ion technology and batteries, they are certainly facing it more than ever before, whether it's for vehicles or tools or you name it. We see, the portable batteries on, the cordless drills. We see those starting fires. So without question, it has complicated their profession. It adds another layer of something that they have to educate themselves on to understand the hazard so they can begin to weigh into, draft the regulations to, provide for effective fire prevention measures and then carry it out. So yes, without question. From an operational perspective, it certainly had. I mean, it is another hazard that needs to be considered. Vehicles are kind of funny because, as I start to think, I mean, getting back to vehicles, I should say, they're kind of funny because over the course of my lifetime, vehicles have changed so much. The safety features that we absolutely rely upon every single day to keep us safe, and thank goodness we have them, do also present unique hazards. The airbags are a great example of that. Airbags, when they're necessary in a vehicle crash, awesome. When they go off after, they can be very traumatic and injure you very, very badly, especially if you're in the wrong place. And airbags are everywhere. These, the canisters that pressurize them are everywhere. We got them in the doors, and we got them in the windows, and we got curtain airbags. They're everywhere. The way they create vehicles now with crumple zones and stronger engine, stronger compartments where the passengers are, makes it more difficult to extricate and using, traditional techniques. So batteries are kind of like the latest chapter in, okay, now this is where we are. Now it's, you've got crumple zones, you got a hardened area, you've got airbags, you've got electric batteries now, you've got these big batteries. So vehicles continue to get more and more complex and create, more opportunities for education and learning, because we have to try and learn as much as we possibly can about them so we don't get injured. But yeah, it certainly does increase the complexity of the response for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And on top of that, the article mentions, motorized e-bikes and whatnot. For any of our listeners who don't know, I'm now located in Cleveland, Ohio, and those bird scooters they're the biggest thing here. I'm sure they are in many cities and towns. And so in those cases, I'm, outside walking my dog and you see these scooters absolutely everywhere. They are propped up against houses and in the yards and against buildings. They have the lithium ion batteries too. I was seeing a large amount of articles come in from New York around, I think it was last year, about lithium ion batteries catching fire in the streets of New York. So, how should the fire service adapt its training or tactics, in your opinion, to effectively handle fires caused by lithium ion technology and batteries?
I would lump this into the category of so many other things. I mean, I went through the fire academy in the Stone Age, and maybe some of the things that we learned we still do almost the exact same way today. I think what is really incumbent upon the fire service, and we do this, but it's incumbent upon the fire service to continue to try and stay up on these kinds of trends so that we don't learn about them through tragedy or we don't learn about them the hard way, that we try and stay out in front of these things. Obviously that is a massive challenge. But the reality of it is if we're gonna be serious about providing for firefighter safety and well-being, we really need to be mindful of the fact that the kinds of calls that we respond to today may look exactly as they did 20 years ago. Um, but the engine is different, the technology is different, the car is different, everything about it is fundamentally different. And so your training programs need to accommodate for that and try and stay as current as they can with the kinds of things that you're going to face. I was in I was in the Bay Area. I'm going to be in the Bay Area again next week. That's where I'm from. It seems like every other car is an electric car in the Bay Area. There's nothing uncommon about them. It's not like they're an anomaly. They're probably in the majority at this point. So the likelihood that you're going to face these kinds of things is really good, especially in a major metropolitan area. So I think staying abreast of the technology and staying abreast through professional articles and reading, the National Transportation Safety Board studies that they do, and any number of authoritative sources, trying to stay current and work with your organization to make sure that your training program is accommodating your needs.
Can you give us a little bit of an insight to maybe any like firehouse conversations that you might have had regarding this topic? What are our firefighters on the ground saying about this?
They're very well aware of it. I will tell you, just
I'm sure.
sitting around the table, they're very well aware, and they'll tell the story of the call that they went to, the challenges of extinguishing the car fire. I was thinking through my head about the very first time we tried to extricate or utilize our normal extrication process to get somebody out of a vehicle, and there was a hardened structure inside the door that we hadn't experienced before, and it made it impossible to do what we were trying to do. Now, we tried for a while, and we learned about that. But that conversation came right back to the fire station. It was passed on from shift to shift to shift, and that became a topic of conversation. I've said it before on the podcast, and I think this is another good opportunity just to sort of restate it. I've been a fire chief, but I've also been a firefighter. So I've spent my time in a lot of places in the organization, and I can tell you that a lot of the best conversations happen around the kitchen table amongst firefighters, their company officers, and the crews, talking about the challenges that they face. They see these gaps. And so I think from a leadership perspective, it's incumbent upon us to be aware of that conversation and be a part of that conversation in our organizations. um, you know, challenge our firefighters to share the information with us. What are they seeing? What are they experiencing? What are they learning? Because we need to make sure that we're not missing something either. So yeah, and I mean the example that I use, we talked about that because it was okay. I guess this is kind of where we're at now. We need to sort of rethink the way we do business. So with electric vehicles, same conversations happening.
So switching to the public's kind of side of this, are there any misconceptions the public might have about lithium ion related incidences?
I don't think the public is really thinking about it from a lithium ion incident. I think there's like a lot of things to think that You have new technology. It's the latest and greatest. You certainly paid for the latest and greatest technology, that it's inherently safe, right? That it's what could go wrong. Uh, the reality of it is no matter how good the technology is, the manufacturing process, things can happen. Accidents can happen. Manufacturing defects can occur. I think most of our listeners have experienced a recall of one sort or another on a vehicle, if not multiple. So these things do happen from time to time. So I think what, when you talk about the public, I think what would be really interesting to sort of share with them is great technology, absolutely, good for the environment, not without its issues though. So just trying to be aware of, you need to be mindful of what you have. It's not necessarily without potential, I would say. Just like anything, like putting a gas-powered vehicle, into your garage. If you have a gasoline leak or anything like that, you run a risk. I think it's important for people to understand the risks that they face to the extent that they can. But I think you're only gonna be able to go so far with that.
So, for someone who does find themselves in a situation where they have an electric vehicle and it has caught fire, what is the number one best thing they can do? They're already pulled off to the side of the road and they have this fire. What is the best thing they can do in that scenario before our first responders show up on scene?
So staying with this scenario, if you are out in the wild and you are driving down the road, the first thing I would tell you is make sure that you're in a safe place. That's the very first thing. Don't stand on the blacktop. Don't stand by the car. Freeways all over the place are named after people who were unfortunately injured or killed by vehicles because people don't pay attention. There's a car on fire. That's interesting, right? I'm going to look at that. I'm not going to pay attention. So get yourself out of harm's way. And I mean, well out of harm's way. If you're standing on the side of a freeway, go stand up in that ice plant because that really honestly is the best place to be. And then call 911. Don't don't spend time trying to open the trunk, trying to get your stuff out, putting yourself in harm's way. Believe me, I've seen plenty of people try and do it. Like they feel like they're back. I got to get my backpack out of the car. It's like you're putting yourself at too big of a risk. Backpack can be replaced. Make sure you're safe. Call 911. Let the professionals come in and handle it. And even if they haven't experienced it before, they've got the protection, they've got the equipment, they have procedures in place to make sure that they remain safe while they continue to battle the hazard. So that would be my advice.
Are there any other insights you'd like to share on this topic?
I'm telling you, Sam, I think this lends itself. I would love to have an expert on the podcast. I would love to revisit this whole conversation and really nerd out about battery technology and what we have today versus where this is going tomorrow. I mean, the idea that we can have vehicles that are just 100% electric, it's like, yeah, of course we do, right? I mean, no kidding. But we also have vehicles that are all electric that will go at comical rates of speed. They're faster than, I mean, they're super fast. They're super sophisticated. I would love to have an expert on here and really pick their brain about the technology and where it's going and what we can look for in the future in terms of can they make the technology safer? That's really what I would like to see because I think we all want to see, sustainable solutions like electric vehicles. We want to see them proliferate, but what's being done to make sure that we're not offsetting all the good that we think we're doing with a whole bunch of other bad stuff.
No, you're absolutely right, Ken. We're barely even scratching the surface. We're just acknowledging the topic right now, bringing awareness to it. I think you're absolutely right. In the near future, we will be having a subject matter expert come on and talk about, just like you said, the in-depth technology and how we can make it more safer for our public. But thank you so much for sharing your insights today. And as always, a link to the article we discussed can be found in the show notes of this episode. If you have a question for the panel, please reach out to us at fireheadlines@wxca.com and let us know what's on your mind. We'll see you back here next week for more Fire Headlines.